The tiny trucking adventures continue. Previously, I built this 1/25th scale 1977 GMC General tractor, so naturally in today's video, I'm going to build a trailer to go with it. If you like giant slabs of styrene as much as I do, you're really going to enjoy today's video. Hello everyone and welcome! Today's project is a first for the channel. I'll actually be building a model kit that won't be converted into RC. That's right, in fact almost no modifications will be required to make this trailer work with the GMC General I built prior. That said though, there are a couple changes I made that I think will be important to any fellow builders out there, so certainly take note of that. Now I don't know a lot about semi-truck trailers, so this was somewhat of a learning experience for me. Fortunately this kit is overall pretty simple and straightforward, and I think it turned out looking great in the end. Not a lot of complexity nor a massive amount of parts when it comes to the assembly process, but some care is certainly required to get everything to fit together correctly. But without any further introductions, let's dive right into the build. After a recent trip to my local hobby shop, I picked up this AMT Fruhoff 40-foot refrigerated trailer. I figured this would look good with the General, as it appears to be a bit of an older design, perhaps better matching the era that the truck is from, though again, I'm no expert. This was also the lowest cost 1/25th scale trailer that they had, so I figured for this first build I'd keep things on the cheaper side. These big rig truck and trailer kits are certainly more expensive than what I'm used to with the automotive kits I usually build, but fortunately, as we'll soon see, this kit builds up into a really nice model when built correctly. Having a look at the box reveals some of the features of this kit, including a sliding rear axle and suspension assembly, openable doors, and the front supports can either be in a raised or lowered position. 157 parts are included, and as I get this model unboxed, you'll see there's a nice amount of detail, and overall everything is pretty well molded. As is typical with many of these AMT kits, they're not always the best options for beginners, especially some of these older designs. Some sanding and trimming is definitely required in areas to get all the parts to fit together correctly. You do have to study the instructions closely for certain steps. This isn't exactly a Lego set to say the least, but with some care and patience, it'll go together really nice, as you'll soon see. Obviously some giant slabs of styrene which form the walls, roof, and the floor. This is certainly the largest model kit in the scale I've ever assembled, but there are some smaller pieces for a detailed axle and suspension assembly. There's also parts included to build a refrigerated trailer, but you can also leave those off if you just want to build a standard dry van. A nice decal sheet and plenty of translucent amber and red lights are also included. Now it can be a little hard here to get some of that detail to show up on camera, but both the exterior and the interior sides of those large pieces have some great molded detail. Rivets, seams, wood grain for the floor, stuff like that. So it's not like they're just a bunch of bare slabs of styrene, there are some fine details present throughout. Relatively soft, rubber-like, licensed Goodyear tires are a great inclusion as well. A very nice kit all around. I was certainly excited to get this thing put together, so let's get started. As I said at the beginning of this video, for the most part I'm building this trailer exactly as instructed, with few parts being used that aren't included in the kit. No need for RC electronics here, as it's just a trailer. I thought I'd keep things simple with this build, however something I think would be nice to try on a future project would be to make the suspension functional. As I put this rear axle and suspension assembly together, you'll see it's a simple leaf spring design, and it certainly wouldn't be that hard to create something that looks similar with moving suspension parts, allowing the wheels to make better contact with the ground and absorb the bumps. The leaf spring parts here will offer absolutely no flex, so there won't be any suspension movement with this trailer, but it's not a big deal, just something I might try on a future project. As expected, plenty of trimming and sanding was required to get all the parts to fit correctly into place. This will become a recurring theme throughout this video. A tedious process, but on this kit especially, it's really a requirement if you want to get everything to fit together well and have a trailer that isn't warped or not square. Piece by piece though, I gradually got this assembly put together. Now as I move on to assembling the tandem axles, here's where I made some slight, but I think very important modifications to this kit. Two metal axles, which I think are about 1.5mm in diameter, are included. These are what the wheels will be mounted to, and they're supposed to go right inside the styrene axle housings. Since these axles will actually be rotating, I figured it would be a good idea to place them inside some steel tubing. That way it's steel on steel and not steel on plastic. Fortunately, I had some 2mm outer diameter, 1.6mm inner diameter steel tubing on hand that the included axles fit right inside of. These were cut and placed inside the axle just as shown. The axles included in the model kit can spin freely inside, with no worries about excessive play or wearing down the plastic axle housings. A very simple, but I think necessary modification to allow the trailer to move with minimal resistance and have no worries about damaging the styrene in this area. Of course, with a solid steel axle like this, once the wheels are glued on, each set of wheels will be locked together, so the one on the left and right side of each axle will always be spinning at the same speed, just like having a lock differential in a car or truck. I would assume on a real trailer like this, the wheels would be on bearings so they could all spin independently of each other. This wouldn't be very hard to do with a model like this. For example, each one of the wheels could have a small bearing on the inside, but I don't see simply gluing the wheels directly to the axles as really being a big issue. Obviously, it's not ideal for cornering, but it'll keep things simple, and on a 1/25th scale model like this, I don't think it really matters that much if the wheels are locked together. With that minor modification completed though, I continued the assembly process just as instructed. I think I may have messed up the air brakes on this axle here. I wasn't sure if the push rod was supposed to go over the axle when the trailer is right side up, just like on the opposite axle, or if it's supposed to look like this, which seems to be what you're supposed to do according to the manual. Any experts out there can let me know below in the comments. Looks like I may have made a minor mistake here, but fortunately not a big deal overall, and here's how the completed assembly looks. With that complete, I turned my attention to the wheels. I love the look of this older style wheel design as well as those officially licensed tires. As you can see, the outer and inner rings are chromed. That could definitely look cool for a project, but I decided to paint the entire wheel white, with no chrome really being present on any part of this trailer. Something like this was obviously designed for utility, not style, so I figured I'd build it more with that philosophy and looking closer to some of the reference pictures I found of trailers from this era. I decided to go ahead and glue the wheels together now in preparation for painting. Once again, some sanding was required to get everything to fit as it should. If I could do this again, I'd probably leave the wheel centerpieces out, paint the bottom of the wheels matte black, and then glue that centerpiece in after the painting is done, but not really a huge deal either way. A lot of times I figure the more gluing and assembly work I can do before painting, the better. That way I don't have to worry about messing up the paint with glue, or find out that some pieces aren't really fitting together properly, and therefore require some cutting or sanding, which is not something I want to do after the paint has been applied. I found it was easy enough just to assemble these wheels as I have here, and then just slide the tires over top into place. This differs from what's shown in the instructions, but how I did it here worked just fine. I never applied any glue to the tires during the final assembly. They aren't the tightest fit, but I haven't had any issues with them coming out of place while driving, so it's probably not necessary. With the wheels done, it's time to bring out the big pieces. I bet you can almost smell that styrene through this video. As easy as it might seem to build essentially a large rectangle, doing it right actually took a bit of time and patience. For the best fitment and final appearance, I really recommend taking your time, sanding away any flash or other imperfections, and ensure every part fits into place well without any warping or misalignment. At first, this kind of seems like a kit that you could just sort of slap together very quickly, but I highly recommend taking your time. Here, when I was gluing in the subframe rails, I made sure that the suspension assembly would fit in between them and be able to slide from end to end. I'm using plenty of glue with this project to ensure the trailer won't come apart while being driven or handled. As much as I may emphasize the importance of ensuring you're taking your time and really getting all these parts to fit together correctly, I do want to say that the parts in this kit do seem well molded and are capable of fitting together very well. This isn't really one of those kits that just falls into place, so to speak. However, if you're willing to ensure proper fitment, I think you'll find everything goes together very well and will deliver a great looking model in the end. A good kit, but it does require some effort and an eye for detail during the assembly. Up near the front of the trailer is where the supports go. While the supports don't go up and down like the real thing, two sets of parts are included, so you have the option of the legs either being fully lowered or in a raised position if the trailer is connected to a tractor. Instead of gluing either one of these sets permanently in place, I decided I would give myself the option of being able to swap these legs out for displaying the trailer both with and without a tractor. Unfortunately, the kit only includes wheels for one set of supports. But being such a simple design, I created my own which I could 3D print. That way I have enough for both sets of legs. I have posted the STL files on our Patreon just below this video if you're watching it on there and want to print a set for your own project. I'll be fitting these on the legs later on after everything has been painted. As you can see, the bottom of the trailer is just about ready for paint. I wanted to put the wheels on and do a quick mock-up with the truck. You'll see the process for connecting the trailer later on in this video, but it's very simple. All I did was replace the kingpin piece included in the model kit with a M2 bolt which fit right in place of where the stock kingpin should go on the trailer. At this point, there were just a few final parts that needed a bit of work before the trailer was ready for paint. I've completely assembled some sections of the trailer such as the floor prior to painting, but I decided not to completely assemble the trailer since I wanted to paint both the inside as well as the outside, which would be extremely difficult if the walls and the roof were in place. We'll just hope the remaining parts of the trailer fit together well, even after some paint has been applied. At this point, the tedious process of getting all the parts fitting together properly and assembling certain portions of the trailer was complete. Now it's time to start laying down some paint. As is typical, I'm just using some spray cans, and much like with the tractor, I'm not overly concerned with uniformity or perfection. I want the finished trailer to look a little grungy and weathered like it's been used, as opposed to something shiny and brand new. I used matte white for the exterior, semi-gloss black for the bottom, and aluminum for the interior panels. I did my best to make the floor sort of look like wood, since there's some nice wood grain detail molded into that piece. And by doing my best, I mean just spraying some vaguely wood-colored paints that I had on hand. It's not like it's going to be all that visible, so I'm not sweating the details on the interior of the trailer, but it turned out looking pretty good in the end regardless. I gave that paint some time to dry before adding additional details with a brush. There were a few sections on the floor and on the suspension assembly that couldn't really be reached very well with the spray can, so I touched up those sections with a brush and some matte black paint. No worries if the paint doesn't match, as I don't want a uniform look on the other side of this trailer anyways. Keeping with the Make It RC black and white color scheme present on the tractor, I decided to hand paint a few portions of the trailer black to continue this theme. I did my best to keep the lines clean, but again, not going for perfection here. I added some additional detail to a few spots such as on the doors and around the roof. Other than that though, it's pretty much just a giant white rectangle. While that paint was drying, I turned my attention to the front supports, attaching the wheels that I 3D printed earlier and getting them painted. After that, I applied a black wash to the trailer wheels and carefully glued them to the axles, making sure they can still spin freely. Like I said earlier, I was able to slip those tires on without any issues, and here's a look at the completed suspension assembly with the wheels in place. Moving back over to the rest of the trailer, I added some final details, including a bit of weathering with a black wash and some pastels. As usual, nothing extraordinary here, just adding a bit of grime and wear. I think it makes the finished model look more interesting when everything isn't perfectly uniform, especially on something like a trailer, which is designed purely for utility, as opposed to something like a sports car. With that complete, it's time for the final assembly, which on theme for this project took some time to get everything seated in place and fitting as close to perfect as possible. Some careful but persuasive tapping was required to get some of the parts to fit like they should, probably not helped by the paint making the tolerances even smaller, but some patience and a keen eye for detail paid off. It might be a stretch to say everything is aligned perfectly, but it's at least very close. Again, I'm using plenty of glue here since this trailer will be towed around and handled, so I want to make sure it's strong enough. Next, I install the doors, being careful not to get any glue on the hinges so they'll be able to open. Magnets might not be a bad idea to help keep the doors closed. However, they seem to fit fairly snug and don't swing open too easily, so for this trailer, I think it's okay as is. Next, I installed the taillights and license plate holder. Both of those are found on the chrome parts tree. I got those glued into place, and while they're a bit too shiny and chromy for my liking right now, I'll soon be giving the entire trailer a coat of matte clear, which will help dull that down to look more how I want. Installing a functional fifth wheel connection was extremely simple. The only modification needed on the trailer was replacing the kingpin included in the model kit with a M2 fastener. That M2 bolt fit right down into a roughly 2mm hole on the fifth wheel mounted to the tractor. The weight of the trailer alone should be enough to keep it in place when driving over smooth surfaces. However, you can also do what I did here and glue a powerful rare earth magnet to the bottom of the fifth wheel as shown. Extremely simple but effective. Later, when I installed the fifth wheel on the tractor, I simply used two M1.6 fasteners and some O-rings sitting in between these two parts. The fifth wheel is securely mounted in place, but can also easily pivot. Going back to where we left off with the trailer, it's time to install some decals. As you can see, a great selection of decals are included with this trailer, most of which though will go unused for this project. This kit has been released with a number of different liveries and configurations, this one here obviously being the Watkins refrigerated trailer. As of posting this video, AMT recently announced the latest issue of this kit, which is the drive-in variant that I'm building here. I don't think it includes the optional refrigeration equipment seen in this kit. It also doesn't seem to have any licensed decals other than Fruhoff, just some nice American flags and AMT decals. So I think as a result, this kit might come in at a slightly lower price than what this specific kit I'm building here is at least depending on where you're buying from, but I don't know for sure. But that certainly looks to be a nice option, especially if you're doing your own custom livery or you've sourced some decals elsewhere. I'm not sure if that new kit will be available at the time of posting this video, but if it's not, it will be available soon. I went ahead and applied the few water slide decals that I'll be using before sealing them with a matte clear. While the clear was drying, I wanted to create my own logos to go on the sides of the trailer. I 3D printed some very thin pieces to serve as a backing. If I had one of those desktop laser cutters, that would probably be a better choice, but these 3D printed parts work just fine. I got these parts painted, applied the Make It RC decals, and just like that, they're ready to be glued to the trailer. Speaking of gluing things to the trailer, it's time to add all of these tiny lights. One of these days, I think it would be awesome to have a trailer with all of these lights functional, but that does seem like quite a project. AMT has included plenty of both the red and amber translucent pieces, which fit pretty well into place. Going off of reference images, I made all of the lights in the rear red, with all of the other lights being amber. Hopefully that's correct, but any experts out there in the audience can let me know in the comments. Now it's time to slide in that rear suspension. I added some final detail to the mud flaps and got those glued into place, followed by the airlines. You just slide it to whatever position you want, line up the holes, and install this lever piece. A slightly tedious process, but it all fit well enough. Something I'll probably need to do at some point is install some magnets to help keep the supports in place, as they're not quite as tight of a fit as I would have hoped, but no big deal there. With those Make It RC logos in place, the trailer is now complete. Of course, I still needed to get the fifth wheel installed on the tractor and get it set to the correct height. I noticed that these two chrome pieces that go around the rear wheels are too tall for the trailer to fit without colliding with them. The best solution I could come up with was just to cut these sections off, sand it smooth, and then use a chrome pen to hide the bare plastic as best as possible. But with that modification made, this rig is finally ready to hit the highway, or maybe the sidewalk. A bit of a process just to build a giant rectangle, but it has resulted in a great looking trailer that I think pairs perfectly with this GMC General. This is the closest I've ever come to building a model kit as normal on this channel, with very few modifications being required to make this work with the RC truck. No point in adding complexity if not needed, but as I said before, I would like to try creating a simple suspension assembly that can be installed in place of the one included with the kit to allow the rear suspension to actually move. As you can see, sometimes when it's on slightly uneven ground, one of the axles on the trailer won't spin, which isn't exactly ideal for achieving a lifelike look while driving. But hey, like I said, I figured I'd keep things simple for this project. Speaking of suspension though, make sure the rear suspension on your tractor isn't bottoming out when the trailer is installed. Obviously the trailer isn't super heavy, but it's certainly enough to push down on the rear of the chassis, so make sure it's not bottoming out, which will result in the frame rails rubbing against the axles, which will negatively impact the performance. While I don't think the rear suspension is bottoming out here on the General currently, it is sitting a little low, so I will probably want to add another set of springs to the rear to get it sitting a bit higher. But hey, maybe not the most spectacular thing I've ever built on this channel, but what good is a semi-truck without a trailer? All in all, a very fun project with a great looking result in the end. A quality kit from AMT for sure, but take your time with it as I had to do a fair bit of work to get everything to fit together as precisely as possible. There's great potential, but it does require some effort. A functional rear suspension setup for these types of trailers is definitely on the to-do list, but currently what I'm working on is testing out some other motor options to give the CTC01 more power. Although not super heavy, this trailer does have a negative impact on performance, to the point of the truck only really working well on flat surfaces. Give it too steep of an incline and it really struggles. While the solution might seem as simple as just slapping in some more powerful motors, that's come with its own set of unforeseen setbacks, but of course I should be able to work out a solution. It's just taking a bit more time than anticipated, but that's just life sometimes. Expect to see an update video in the near future with this GMC General making more power, while retaining its simplistic, easy to assemble design and durability. As always, a huge thanks to all our supporters over on Patreon. Not only are you helping to make this content possible, but you can get yourself access to the STL files I've used for this project and many others, and do some Model to RC conversions yourself. Certainly more updates to come with the CTC01, but I'll be showcasing more of that in the near future. For now though, I hope you all enjoyed today's video, and any of you fellow builders out there found it helpful. As always, thank you all for watching, and stay tuned for more videos coming very soon.